Right now, as you are listening to this, the very machinery you're using to look at the world around you is quietly tearing itself apart.
It's a completely constant process.
Yeah, and it's rebuilding itself from scratch. Like the macula, which is the tissue at the back of your retina responsible for your sharpest vision, it completely replaces itself with a brand new layer of cells every 2 days.
Which is just wild when you really think about the speed of that.
I mean, by the time the weekend rolls around, you are literally seeing the world through brand new tissue.
Exactly.
But what happens when the cellular delivery truck drops off the wrong raw materials for that rebuild? Or worse, what if the materials are right there in your bloodstream, but your body has just, forgotten how to unpack them?
Well, that right there is the fundamental disconnect we are operating under in modern health. We constantly treat chronic pain or fatigue or muscle loss as if the body is just this old machine that's slowly rusting and deteriorating over time.
Like it's just inevitable wear and tear.
Right. But the biological reality is that we are in a constant state of demolition and reconstruction.
Yeah.
And if that reconstruction fails, it's rarely because the master blueprint is flawed. It's almost always because the assembly line is literally starving for specific elemental building blocks.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today.
Yep.
We are going to entirely dismantle and hopefully redefine our understanding of the human body's structural integrity.
We really have to start from the ground up.
We do. We're tracking the hidden root causes of chronic illness, starting all the way down at the microscopic amino acids building our tissues. Then we're dropping into the harsh chemical environment of the stomach, crossing the border wall of the gut, looking into hidden infections in our jawbones, and finally descending into the mitochondria of our cells.
And to map out this terrain, we are analyzing a really comprehensive interview featured on Gary Brecka's Health and Longevity show.
Yeah, the source material for this one is packed.
It really is. The guest is Dr. David Minkoff. And his perspective is incredibly layered. He isn't just looking at this from a theoretical academic standpoint.
Right, he's lived it.
Exactly. He is a board-certified pediatrician, he completed a fellowship in infectious disease, and he founded a major integrated medicine clinic.
Plus, and this is the part that blows my mind, he's a 43-time Ironman triathlete.
Yeah, that is not a typo.
I know, they actually joked in the source material about him doing 44, but he had to clarify it was only 43.
Just 43, no big deal.
Right. But regardless, surviving even one of those races requires extreme physiological durability. Yeah. Doing 43 requires an intimate, highly mechanical understanding of the human body under extreme stress.
You have to know your machine inside and out.
Absolutely. So whether you are an elite athlete trying to optimize your recovery, or, maybe you've just been dealing with mysterious lingering fatigue that your doctor can't seem to figure out, we are going to explore the actual mechanics of how your cellular machinery operates.
And that understanding of cellular machinery for Dr. Minkoff, well, it was born out of a very frustrating mechanical failure in his own life.
A major failure.
Yeah. Back when he was pushing his body to the absolute limit in endurance sports, he was a strict vegetarian. He was convinced, as a lot of people naturally are, that a plant-based diet was the absolute pinnacle of human nutrition.
Sure, it's marketed as the cleanest way to eat.
Exactly. So he was training constantly, swimming, biking, running, lifting, just punishing his body. And then he tore a hamstring.
Which, a torn hamstring is pretty standard in the endurance world.
Yeah.
But the aftermath wasn't standard at all.
No, it wasn't. The tissue just refused to knit back together. For a full year, he couldn't get it to stabilize.
A whole year of just chronic injury.
Right. And he went through the entire standard medical protocol. Ice, heat, injections, chiropractic adjustments, deep tissue massage. Nothing worked.
Wow.
The moment he tried to push a workout on the track, he could literally feel the muscle fiber on the verge of shredding again.
Because he was treating the injury locally, right? Like massaging the leg rather than treating it systemically.
Exactly. And the realization he eventually came to changes how we need to view nutrition entirely. His body wasn't failing to heal because the physical therapy was wrong.
Right.
It was failing because he was literally out of the specific raw materials required to rebuild human tissue. And this is where we really have to establish the profound difference between proteins and amino acids.
Yeah, I think we need to linger on this for a minute because it's a misconception almost everyone has.
Yeah.
We see the words amino acids and protein marketed on supplement tubs, and we treat the words as synonyms.
We treat them like they're the exact same thing.
But chemically and functionally, they're entirely different things.
Let's break down the actual chemistry of it. The word amino originates from Greek, and it refers to nitrogen. So amino acids are nitrogen-based organic compounds.
Okay.
Depending on the scientific literature you reference, there are between 20 and 22 of these specific amino acids found in nature.
So they are the base elements, like the individual bricks.
Exactly. They are the single bricks. Proteins are the finished, complex structures that are built from those bricks.
It makes me think of trying to build a brick house. Like, if you tear a hamstring, you need specific bricks to repair that wall. But eating a steak to get those materials is like ordering bricks. And the delivery company drops an entire pre-built brick wall onto your empty lot.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. Your body can't just take a pre-built wall of cow muscle and shove it into your torn human hamstring.
No, it doesn't work like that at all.
It has to undergo this massive demolition project to smash that cow wall down into individual bricks before your local cells can even touch them.
And the scale of that demolition is staggering when you look at it under a microscope. Take a single microscopic fiber of meat from that steak.
Just one tiny fiber.
Yeah. If you mapped out the sequence, you would find roughly 5,600 amino acids chained together in a highly specific configuration.
5,600 individual links in just one microscopic chain.
Yes. And a chain that large is structurally incapable of passing through the membrane of the small intestine and entering the bloodstream.
It's physically too big.
Way too big. So digestion isn't just about extracting energy, it's a very aggressive dismantling process.
A demolition site.
Right. When that meat hits the stomach, an enzyme called pepsin is deployed to start cleaving that massive chain apart.
Okay, so the pepsin is like a sledgehammer.
Exactly.
Oh.
And as it moves into the small intestine, other enzymes continue breaking it down into smaller and smaller fragments until you are left with single amino acids, or maybe chains of just 2 or 3, known as di- and tripeptides.
And only then can they cross the barrier into your blood.
Only then.
So once they're in the blood, they circulate to the local cells, and the cells reassemble those single bricks into whatever specific human protein is required at that exact second.
Right.
And we need to broaden our definition of what a protein actually is here, because, I mean, gym culture has conditioned us to think protein only equals skeletal muscle, like biceps and quads.
Oh, skeletal muscle is just a fraction of it. The single most abundant protein in the human body is collagen.
Which is everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It forms the physical scaffolding of your bones, your tendons, ligaments, and skin.
Wow.
And the second most abundant is hemoglobin, which is the protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen.
So it's not just muscles.
Not at all. Your hair is protein. The enzymes required to digest your food and detoxify your liver, those are proteins.
And crucially, the immune system is almost entirely protein-based, right?
Yes. The antibodies fighting off infections, the neurotransmitters allowing your brain to communicate with your gut, the hormones regulating your sleep, they are all assembled from those 20 to 22 amino acids.
So if you run out of these bricks, it isn't just your athletic performance that suffers.
No, your body's internal communication grid and your defense systems literally begin to power down.
Which brings us back to the sheer volume of structural turnover happening inside you. We mentioned the macula replacing itself every 2 days.
Yeah, and think about your gut. The entire mucosal lining of your gastrointestinal tract, stretching from your mouth all the way to the other end, it covers roughly the surface area of 2 tennis courts.
2 tennis courts inside your body.
Right, and that entire cellular barrier replaces itself with a fresh layer every 3 to 4 days.
Every 3 to 4 days. Think about the metabolic energy required to manufacture 2 tennis courts worth of tissue twice a week.
It's a massive construction project.
It is. And if we zoom out, virtually the entire physical structure of the human body turns over all of its tissues every 84 days.
And this constant cellular turnover explains a really critical, widely misunderstood aspect of aging.
Okay, how so?
Well, when we are young, in our teens and 20s, the body operates an incredibly efficient recycling program. When a cell reaches the end of its life, the body breaks it down, salvages the amino acids, and reuses them to build the new cell.
So it's scavenging the old bricks.
Yes. But as we age, that internal recycling mechanism degrades. It becomes sloppy. We start losing more amino acids through our waste systems.
Wow, that completely flips conventional wisdom on its head. I mean, we usually assume that because a 65-year-old is less active than a 25-year-old, they need less structural nutrition.
Right, but it's actually the exact opposite. Because the recycling machinery is failing, older adults actually have a much higher requirement for raw, new amino acids just to maintain their baseline function.
The clinical literature strongly corroborates this, especially in longevity research, right?
It does. If that escalating demand isn't met, the body has no choice but to cannibalize itself to find the aminos it needs for critical organ function.
It starts eating itself.
Basically, yeah. This leads to a condition called sarcopenia, and the data shows that the average person loses 25 to 30% of their lean body mass between the ages of 20 and 60.
Losing a third of your structural mass by age 60 is terrifying. And we usually just, we brush it off as, oh, they're getting older and shrinking.
No, normalize it.
Right. But it's not just your shoulders getting narrower. Your bone density is dropping. Your tendons are becoming brittle. Your internal organs and brain tissue are physically atrophying.
And this internal atrophy is exactly what Dr. Minkoff was experiencing with his hamstring.
Ah, it comes back to the hamstring.
It does. He was demanding a massive amount of structural turnover from his daily triathlete training, but his vegetarian diet was simply not supplying the necessary building blocks.
He was trying to build a mansion with a handful of twigs.
Exactly. The source material notes that when he finally optimized his intake of essential amino acids, he put on 9 pounds of lean body mass in just a few months.
9 pounds.
Yes. And his hamstring finally knitted back together. And then 3 months later, he raced Ironman Canada, which, by the way, involves a grueling, freezing swim and brutal mountain climbs.
Sounds awful.
It is. But he recorded his best time ever.
And the fascinating part of his recovery is where those 9 pounds actually went. Because he didn't suddenly look like a bodybuilder.
No, not at all.
His waist didn't change, his biceps didn't suddenly bulge. Those 9 pounds of new mass went entirely to reinforcing his bone density, his heart muscle, his liver, and his connective tissues.
Right. He had been suffering from systemic internal wasting and had zero idea.
It forces us to look at the broader population and ask, how many chronic injuries, how much chronic fatigue is simply the result of invisible structural starvation?
Probably a massive percentage.
Which leads us to the natural solution everyone jumps to.
Yeah.
Just eat more protein, right? Like if you need bricks, look at the nutrition label, find a bar with 20 grams of protein, and you're good.
That is the standard advice.
But the source material makes a really compelling case that reading the grams of protein on a label is a fundamentally broken metric.
It is entirely broken because it only measures what enters your mouth, not what your cells can actually use.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In nutritional science, the gold standard for measuring how efficiently a protein source is used to build human tissue is the nitrogen balance test.
Okay, let's walk through how this test actually works, because it relies on that nitrogen difference we talked about earlier. Amino acids contain nitrogen, whereas fats and carbohydrates do not.
Correct. Fats and carbs are just carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Okay.
So to run the nitrogen balance test, researchers bring a subject into a controlled environment and feed them a balanced diet to reach a sort of neutral baseline.
Like a clean slate.
Right. Then, for the next month, they feed the subject only a single monoprotein source.
Just one type of protein.
Yes. Let's use whey protein as the example here. They measure the exact grams of nitrogen going into the body because proteins are universally about 16% nitrogen by weight.
So if you feed someone 100 grams of whey protein, you know for a fact you are putting 16 grams of nitrogen into their system.
Exactly.
So we have 16 grams of raw building material entering the body. The real question is, how do we track if the cells actually used it to rebuild that torn hamstring or regenerate the gut lining?
We measure the waste. The body excretes unused nitrogen primarily through urine with, some trace amounts in sweat and feces.
Ah, so what goes in minus what comes out?
The biological math is really straightforward. If the nitrogen ends up in the toilet, your body rejected it. If the nitrogen stays inside the body, it means it was successfully integrated into your cellular structure.
And the utilization numbers from this test, they absolutely destroy modern dietary dogma.
They really do.
Let's take whey protein, which is the undisputed king of the fitness supplement industry. People consume it by the bucket after workouts. If you ingest 100 grams of whey protein, what percentage is actually utilized by the body for structure?
A mere 16%.
16%.
Yes, just 16.
Meaning 84% of the amino acids in that shake are completely rejected for tissue building.
And the metabolic consequence of that 84% rejection is where we really have to pay attention.
What happens to it?
Well, the body doesn't just pass those rejected amino acids out intact. The liver has to intercept them and physically cleave the nitrogen molecule off so it can excrete it as urea.
Okay.
And once you strip the nitrogen away from an amino acid, what are you left with?
You're left with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen.
Which is the exact chemical structure of a carbohydrate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The liver then undergoes a process called gluconeogenesis, converting those leftover carbon-hydrogen-oxygen structures straight into glucose.
Are you kidding? So that massive scoop of whey protein you took to build muscle is primarily being processed by your liver as a sugar payload.
That is exactly what is happening.
That fundamentally invalidates the way the fitness industry counts macros. People think they're eating a pure protein, but their liver's turning 84% of it into sugar.
It's a huge blind spot.
Okay, let's move down the list. What about soy protein?
Soy hovers right around 16 to 17% utilization.
Almost the same as whey. And plant proteins in general, like pea protein, rice protein.
Across the board, plant proteins score below 10% on the nitrogen utilization test.
Below 10%. I have to pause and push back on this. Because if plant proteins are yielding less than 10% structural building blocks, how do entirely plant-based athletes even function?
It's a fair question.
I mean, I know several vegan endurance athletes who are highly competitive. If their utilization is that low, how are they surviving without their muscles literally dissolving?
Well, they survive because the human body is an absolute master of compensation, but it comes at a severe metabolic cost.
What kind of cost?
The reason plant proteins score so poorly is due to their amino acid profile. They are notoriously deficient in certain essential amino acids, particularly leucine, methionine, and lysine.
So they're missing specific bricks.
Exactly. When your cells receive a shipment of amino acids to build a specific protein, it's like following a recipe. If the recipe calls for methionine and the plant protein didn't supply any, the cellular assembly line just halts.
Just stops.
Yes. The incomplete chain is scrapped and turned into glucose. So, to survive this, a plant-based athlete's body has to constantly break down its own existing tissues.
Wait, it breaks itself down.
It has to. It starts cannibalizing older muscle or bone just to liberate the missing methionine required to finish rebuilding the critical tissues of the heart or lungs.
Wow.
It is a state of perpetual physiological stress.
It's like a contractor realizing he has no mortar for the brick house, so he decides to tear down the chimney just to scavenge the mortar to build the living room wall.
That is a brilliant analogy. That's exactly what's happening. It keeps you alive, but the house is slowly shrinking.
That is wild. And this issue of missing essential amino acids brings us to the most surprising revelation in the hierarchy, which is collagen.
Oh, collagen is a fascinating one.
Collagen is an absolute juggernaut in the wellness industry right now. I mean, people put it in their coffee, they take gummies, they use the creams. It's universally marketed as the holy grail for joint repair and anti-aging. How does it score on the nitrogen utilization test?
By itself, collagen scores 0%.
0.
It is completely non-functional as a standalone protein source. 0% utilized.
How is that biologically possible if collagen is the most abundant protein in our own bodies?
Because dietary collagen is entirely devoid of tryptophan, which is one of the essential amino acids.
It's completely missing one of the core bricks.
Exactly. The mechanism here is absolute. The ribosomes in your cells, the microscopic machines that actually stitch amino acids together, they require all essential amino acids to be present to function.
So if one is missing, the whole line shuts down.
Right. Without tryptophan, the ribosome simply cannot initiate the assembly of new human proteins.
So if you were stranded on a desert island and your only food source was a bucket of collagen powder,
and your body was somehow blocked from scavenging tryptophan from its own decaying tissues, you would quickly die of protein starvation.
that is just crazy to think about. So all those people dutifully scooping collagen into their morning coffee to fix their knees are getting zero structural benefit, unless they happen to be eating another protein source rich in tryptophan at the exact same time.
Exactly. You have to bridge the gap.
Okay, so moving up the hierarchy, we finally see some efficiency with animal products. Meat and fish score around 33% utilization.
Right. Which is double the efficiency of whey or soy, but it still means 2/3 of a steak is processed as waste or converted to glucose.
Still a lot of waste. But the highest scores found in whole foods are really fascinating.
They are. A whole chicken egg, specifically one raised on pasture, achieves 48% utilization.
48%. But the source material included a massive caveat regarding eggs.
A critical caveat. You must consume the yolk.
The yolk is the key.
Yes. The fitness trend of eating egg white omelets to avoid fat and cholesterol, it actively destroys the protein's utility.
Because it's unbalancing the profile.
Exactly. The essential amino acid methionine is located almost exclusively in the yolk. When you throw the yolk away and eat only the egg whites, your utilization plummets from 48% right back down to roughly 16%.
Nature designed the egg as a complete package for a reason.
It really did.
So the whole egg gets 48%. Is there anything higher in the natural world?
Human breast milk reaches roughly 49% utilization, which makes sense, as it's perfectly designed for the rapid growth of an infant.
Makes total sense.
But to push beyond that 50% barrier, you have to turn to specific, scientifically calibrated amino acid supplements.
Like the ones Dr. Minkoff was experimenting with.
Right. The source material references formulas like perfect amino, which are engineered to provide the exact stoichiometric ratio of essential amino acids required by human ribosomes.
So it's the perfect recipe.
Precisely. Because the ratio is perfectly balanced, with no missing links to halt the assembly line, the utilization rate jumps to 99%.
99% of the nitrogen stays in the body to build tissue, with virtually zero waste for the liver to process into sugar.
It's incredible efficiency.
That really clarifies why a patient might struggle with a lingering injury for years, start taking a perfectly calibrated ratio of aminos, and suddenly their plantar fasciitis disappears and their nails start growing faster.
They finally provided the exact blueprint the cells were waiting for.
But having the right materials is only half the battle. This brings us to a massive physiological roadblock. Let's say you eat that perfect pasture-raised whole egg.
Okay.
You still have to extract the aminos from it. You have to pass through one of the most chemically extreme, and I would say medically abused, environments in the human body.
The stomach.
The stomach. We are walking right into the great stomach acid paradox.
And the pharmacological statistics regarding the stomach are alarming. Tens of millions of people operate daily on proton pump inhibitors, or PPIs.
We are talking about drugs like Nexium, Prilosec, and Tagamet, right?
Right, and their sole function is to shut down the cellular pumps that produce stomach acid.
These drugs are ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I mean, they used to require a prescription, but now you can grab them off the shelf next to the breath mints at any pharmacy. People take them for daily heartburn without a second thought.
The irony is found right in the physician's desk reference. The clinical guidelines for these medications explicitly state they are intended for short-term, acute use.
Like how short?
No more than 2 to 3 weeks. Typically just to allow a bleeding gastric ulcer to heal.
2 to 3 weeks.
Yes. Yet patients are routinely kept on them for 5, 10, even 20 years.
What actually happens to the human machine when you artificially suppress stomach acid for a decade?
The downstream effects are systemic and, frankly, catastrophic. First, stomach acid is required to ionize minerals.
Yeah.
Without a highly acidic environment, you simply cannot absorb iron, magnesium, or zinc, which leads to immediate systemic mineral deficiencies.
So you're taking all these supplements and just wasting them?
Exactly. Second, and perhaps more dangerously, the world we inhabit is not sterile. Every bite of food you take, whether it's raw fish or an organic kale salad, is populated with bacteria, fungal spores, and occasional parasites.
Yeah, but true.
Right. A healthy stomach maintains a pH of 1 to 2. That is battery acid level corrosiveness.
Battery acid.
It is an evolutionary defense mechanism designed to instantly incinerate foreign pathogens before they can access the delicate, highly absorptive environment of the small intestine.
So it's a security checkpoint.
It is. And when you take a PPI, you disarm the perimeter defense.
This sets the stage for a condition we hear about constantly now, SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Because the bacteria survive the neutralized stomach environment, they wash right down into the small intestine.
And it's basically paradise down there.
Oh, it's dark, it's warm, and it's constantly flooded with nutrients. The bacteria set up camp and begin fermenting your food, producing massive amounts of gas.
Which leads to chronic, painful bloating and distension.
Exactly. But the tragedy of zero stomach acid circles right back to our protein discussion.
Because of the enzyme pepsin.
Yes. We mentioned earlier that pepsin is the specific enzyme responsible for initiating the demolition of those massive 5,600 link protein chains.
It's the sledgehammer that starts breaking down the brick wall.
But pepsin is secreted by the stomach in an inactive form called pepsinogen.
It's inactive.
Right. It only activates and becomes a functional enzyme when it is exposed to extreme acid.
Oh, wow.
So if you are taking an acid blocker, your stomach pH never drops low enough to activate the pepsin.
Which means the digestion of protein literally never begins. You could be eating the highest quality grass-fed ribeye on the planet. But if your pepsin is dormant, that giant unbroken protein chain simply passes right through your stomach intact.
It never gets broken down into the single amino acids required to cross into your bloodstream.
You become systemically starved of building blocks, regardless of how impeccable your diet is.
The clinical data from Dr. Minkoff's practice highlights this perfectly. When they run comprehensive intracellular amino acid profiles on their patients, they find that 95% of the population is deficient in essential amino acids.
95%.
Yeah,
Because the raw materials are just passing right through them.
exactly.
The ultimate tragic irony of this entire situation is why people take these medications in the first place. I mean, they experience acid reflux or GERD. They feel a fiery burning sensation in their esophagus.
Oh, right.
So the logical, intuitive conclusion is, it burns, therefore I must be producing too much acid.
It is entirely logical for a patient to assume that, but the anatomical mechanism of the stomach dictates the exact opposite.
Okay, explain that.
Separating your esophagus from your stomach is a muscular valve called the lower esophageal sphincter. Its primary job is to clamp tightly shut during digestion, so the corrosive stomach contents don't splash upwards.
What is the biological trigger that tells that muscle to clamp shut?
It is a chemical trigger. The sphincter relies on the presence of extreme acid, a pH of 1 or 2, to signal that digestion is occurring.
Oh.
That sharp drop in pH is the signal to lock the door.
But as we age, or as we endure chronic stress and poor diets, our natural ability to produce that intense hydrochloric acid begins to weaken.
Right. By the time many adults reach their 40s, their baseline stomach acid might weaken from a robust pH of 1 down to a sluggish pH of 4 or 5.
Let's contextualize a pH of 4. That is roughly the acidity of common household vinegar.
And vinegar is undeniably acidic. If you pour it into an open wound, it will burn.
Oh, absolutely.
Your esophagus does not have the thick, mucus-lined protection that your stomach has. So if a fluid with the acidity of vinegar splashes up into your throat, it will cause severe burning and inflammation.
But here's the catastrophic mechanical failure. A pH of 4 is acidic enough to burn your delicate esophageal tissue, but it is not acidic enough to trigger the sphincter to close.
That is the paradox of GERD. The sphincter remains lax and open because it never received the extreme high acid signal. The weak, vinegar-like acid churns up into the throat, causes agony, and the patient responds by taking an acid blocker to neutralize it entirely.
Taking an antacid in this scenario is like disabling your home's entire security system just because the siren is too loud.
That's exactly what it is.
Yes, you silence the alarm, you stop the immediate burning sensation, but the front door remains wide open for pathogens, and you completely shut down your ability to extract amino acids from your food.
And the functional medicine approach to this is beautifully counterintuitive. When patients present with GERD, instead of prescribing acid blockers, functional doctors often prescribe more acid.
They give acid to someone complaining of heartburn.
Yes. They have the patient take betaine HCl hydrochloric acid with their meals.
That sounds crazy.
It does, but the results are immediate. The supplemental acid drops the stomach pH back down to an optimal 1 or 2. The esophageal sphincter finally receives the correct chemical signal and slams shut.
So the splashing stops.
The splashing stops, the GERD resolves entirely, and the pepsin is activated to finally begin digesting protein again.
They never had too much acid. They desperately lacked it. I want anyone listening to pause and think about a friend or family member who have been chewing Tums for a decade.
They are everywhere.
They are systematically starving their body of the building blocks of life and setting the stage for what happens next. Because when those undigested protein chains and live bacteria slip past the broken stomach checkpoint, they crash into the small intestine.
And that initiates an autoimmune cascade.
To grasp the mechanics of autoimmunity, we have to look at the geography of the immune system. We often visualize our immune system as a sort of ethereal force field, or white blood cells randomly patrolling the bloodstream.
Right, like cops on a beat.
Exactly. But in reality, roughly 70% of your entire immune system is permanently stationed in a highly concentrated area surrounding your small intestine.
70%. It's a massive deployment.
Why is the army gathered there?
Anatomically, these clusters of immune cells are called Peyer's patches, or gut-associated lymphoid tissue. The body concentrates its defenses there because the small intestine is the primary, most vulnerable border crossing in the human body.
Because of the food we eat.
Yes, every time you swallow, you are introducing foreign material from the outside world into the center of your body. The immune system stations its troops at the intestinal wall to monitor everything attempting to cross into the bloodstream.
That border wall, the intestinal epithelial lining, is designed to be a highly selective, tightly woven net. It's only supposed to grant passage to microscopic, fully processed nutrients like single amino acids or simple sugars.
But the modern environment wages a relentless daily assault on the integrity of that net.
What kind of assault?
Glyphosate from pesticides,
Yeah.
emulsifiers in processed foods, chronic stress, NSAID, pain relievers, alcohol. They all act as chemical irritants that degrade the intestinal lining.
Like pouring acid on a fishing net.
Basically, the tight junctions holding the cells together begin to loosen and pull apart. The wall becomes porous and permeable. This is the mechanical reality behind the term leaky gut.
So now we have physical holes in the border wall. Remember those massive 5,600 link protein chains from the steak that the stomach failed to digest because the pepsin wasn't activated?
They now have an unobstructed pathway.
Just floating right in.
Instead of being dismantled into safe single amino acids, these massive unbroken animal protein fibers slip right through the gaps in the leaky gut and crash directly into the systemic blood circulation.
How does the immune system, sitting right there at the border, react to a giant piece of cow protein floating in the blood?
It reacts with immediate and overwhelming hostility.
I would imagine.
The immune system operates on a very simple binary code. It identifies things as either self or not self. Every cell native to your body has a specific protein marker identifying it as you.
Like an ID badge.
Exactly. When a roaming macrophage or T cell bumps into a massive undigested protein chain from a piece of calf liver, it scans the marker.
And it realizes there's no ID badge.
Right. It instantly recognizes that this complex protein structure is not self. It flags it as a foreign invader and initiates the production of specific antibodies designed to hunt down and destroy that exact protein sequence.
So the immune system is functioning exactly as it was designed to. It's attacking an intruder. But how does this logical defense mechanism mutate into an autoimmune disease where the body suddenly turns on its own organs?
Through a biological phenomenon known as molecular mimicry.
Molecular mimicry.
Yes. The proteins that make up the animal tissues we eat share a tremendous amount of structural overlap with the proteins that make up our own tissues.
So we share similar blueprints. I mean, a cow's thyroid gland tissue probably looks a lot like a human's thyroid gland tissue under a microscope.
Precisely. So the immune system manufactures an antibody specifically designed to seek and destroy the invading calf liver protein. But as that highly targeted antibody circulates through your bloodstream, it brushes past your own thyroid gland, or maybe the synovial fluid in your own joints. The antibody's receptor gets confused. It looks at your thyroid tissue and assesses that the structural sequence is incredibly similar to the invader it was programmed to attack.
So it thinks your thyroid is the invader.
Yes. So it locks on and begins destroying your own tissue.
This molecular confusion is the underlying mechanism for conditions like Hashimoto's thyroiditis or rheumatoid arthritis, where the body relentlessly attacks the joints.
And molecular mimicry isn't the only trigger. The source material outlines a secondary cause for this autoimmune confusion.
Toxic accumulation.
Toxic accumulation. Right. If a patient's local tissues become embedded with heavy metals like mercury or lead, or saturated with microplastics or biotoxins, the physical structure of that tissue actually distorts.
It changes shape.
It begins to look funny or deformed to the patrolling immune cells. The immune system scans a joint cartilage cell coated in heavy metals, decides it no longer possesses the clean self-marker, and initiates an attack to clear out the damaged tissue.
This fundamental understanding of why the body is attacking itself highlights a massive philosophical rift in modern medicine. When a patient is diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, the standard allopathic approach is often to prescribe powerful biological drugs like Humira or Enbrel.
Right.
What is the actual mechanism of action for those drugs?
They are powerful immunosuppressants. Their primary function is to artificially block the chemical signals of the immune system, effectively paralyzing the body's defensive response.
So they chemically blindfold the guard dog.
Yes, and from a purely symptomatic perspective, it can seem miraculous. The immune attack halts, the localized inflammation subsides, and the patient feels a reduction in pain.
Because the war stopped.
But the expert in the source material vehemently argues against this as a long-term solution, and it's rooted in a core biological truth. The human body is incredibly intelligent, and it never expends energy for nothing.
Right. If your body is burning massive amounts of energy to produce armies of antibodies, it's not because your immune system suddenly became stupid. It's because it is actively hunting a real present threat.
If your house is on fire and the smoke alarm is blaring, taking an immunosuppressant drug is the biological equivalent of taking a hammer, smashing the smoke alarm, and going back to sleep.
That is terrifying.
You have successfully silenced the annoying noise, but the house is still actively burning down. The heavy metals, the stealth pathogens, the undigested proteins, the actual root causes are still freely circulating in your system.
And the disclaimers on the commercials for those drugs spell out the exact danger of blinding the guard dog. They casually mention, may cause tuberculosis, may increase risk of lymphoma.
Yeah, they have to say that.
Because when you paralyze the immune system to stop the joint pain, you leave the front door wide open for any dormant virus or bacteria to proliferate unchecked.
The functional medicine approach, as detailed in the source, takes the opposite path. It requires playing detective to figure out why the alarm is sounding.
Let's talk about the case study they mentioned.
There is a profound case study discussed in the interview about a woman suffering from severe rheumatoid arthritis. By the time she arrived at the clinic, she was heavily medicated on steroids and methotrexate.
Which is a harsh immunosuppressant often used in chemotherapy, right?
Yes, it's very intense. They ran a test for her sedimentation rate, which measures systemic inflammation. A healthy, normal rate should be under 15. Hers was sitting at 60.
60. Her entire system was engulfed in a 5-alarm fire, despite being on powerful suppressants.
Exactly. But instead of increasing her drug dosage to suppress the fire further, the clinic worked to remove the fuel.
So what'd they do?
They repaired the permeability of her gut lining to stop the undigested proteins from leaking. They aggressively chelated heavy metals from her tissues. They tracked down and eliminated hidden infections.
And what happened?
The results speak to the regenerative power of the body.
Right.
Within 3 months, she was actively weaning off her pharmaceutical medications. By month 8, her sedimentation rate had plummeted from 60 down to 7. Even more incredibly, her rheumatoid factor and anti-nuclear antibodies, the specific blood markers indicating that her body was hacking itself, turned completely negative.
Let's synthesize what that actually means. It means she didn't just manage her rheumatoid arthritis, she no longer had the disease.
It was gone.
We have been culturally conditioned to view these lifelong autoimmune conditions as an incurable glitch in the human machine. But this perspective argues that the symptoms are actually evidence of the body functioning perfectly, mounting a desperate, intelligent defense against a constantly poisoned environment.
And when we investigate poisoned environments, we have to acknowledge that the most devastating toxins aren't always coming from external sources like pesticides or heavy metals.
Where are they coming from?
Sometimes the most aggressive intruders set up permanent factories right inside our own bodies, completely masked from traditional diagnostics.
This leads us into a territory that borders on the unbelievable. But the clinical reality is fascinating. Hidden invaders, dental toxicity, and the Lyme epidemic. Let's start with the dental aspect. The story of the HUD carrier is one of the most striking medical mysteries I've ever come across.
It perfectly encapsulates the concept of focal infection.
That's a focal infection.
It's a localized area of hidden rot that systemically poisons the rest of the body.
Let's set the scene for this story. A HUD carrier's job involves brutal physical labor. He carries heavy slates of wet cement and plaster up and down ladders all day to supply stucco workers.
Right.
This man was in peak physical condition. One morning, he bends over simply to tie his work boots, and a horrendous, agonizing pain tears through his lower back.
And this wasn't a tweak or a muscle spasm. From that exact moment, he lost the physical ability to stand upright.
He was completely incapacitated. We fast forward 7 long years. 7 years of being unable to work, unable to live normally.
His chronic suffering.
He finally comes into a chiropractic clinic where Dr. Minkoff is doing physical examinations. This man literally cannot walk through the door. He takes a taxi to the clinic, straps on tile layer knee pads, and physically crawls into the exam room on his hands and knees.
7 years of crawling. And based on standard structural diagnostics, the problem appeared obvious. An MRI clearly showed a severely herniated disc in his lumbar spine.
Structural imaging points right to the disc, so the medical system attacks the disc. Over those 7 years, he undergoes 80 separate sessions on a spinal decompression traction table, trying to create space in the vertebrae.
Wow.
0 improvement. He's still crawling. They try prolotherapy, injecting chemical irritants into the ligaments to stimulate a localized healing cascade. Nothing changes.
This is the critical juncture where functional diagnostics diverge from structural orthopedics. When local treatments continually fail, you have to look for systemic toxic blockages that are preventing the tissue from healing.
So what did they do differently?
Dr. Minkoff performed an autonomic response test, which is a type of energetic screening used to find stress points in the nervous system. The primary issue that flagged for this patient wasn't located anywhere near his lumbar spine.
Where was it?
The test indicated a massive pocket of gangrenous pulp tissue located elsewhere in his body.
Gangrenous pulp.
Yeah.
We are talking about dead, rotting flesh. So the doctor asks him, have you ever had a dead tooth or a major root canal?
Right.
And the patient suddenly remembers that 7 years ago, in the weeks right before his back exploded, he had suffered from a horrific toothache.
The timeline is the key. He had gone to a dentist to get a root canal. But while sitting in the chair as the dentist was drilling, he got a visceral, panicked gut feeling that the procedure was wrong.
Like a bad intuition.
Exactly. He went back the next day to complain. The dentist lost his temper, kicked him out of the practice, and the man was left with a half-excavated root canal covered by a temporary cap.
Unbelievable.
6 weeks later, he bends over to tie his shoe, and his spine gives out.
For 7 years, neither he nor any of his doctors connected the two events because the entire premise of a root canal is the severing and removal of the nerve root.
Which means no pain.
Right. Once the nerve is gone, you no longer feel local pain. You don't feel the pressure of an infection building up in the jawbone. It is a silent, painless, toxic factory.
The clinic immediately referred him to a biological dentist who utilized a cone beam CT scan.
What is that?
It's a specialized 3D imaging technology that looks deep into the density of the jawbone, which standard 2D dental x-rays often completely miss.
Then what did they find?
What they discovered was a massive festering abscess of anaerobic bacteria sitting above that botched root canal, eating away at the bone and extending up into his sinus cavity.
The biological dentist extracted the dead tooth, and literally a full tablespoon of black, gangrenous pus drained out of his jaw.
That is just horrifying.
A tablespoon. The infection was so deeply entrenched in the bone that he required 6 straight weeks of antibiotics to clear it. But here is the undeniable punchline to the story. After the dead tooth was removed and the toxic factory was shut down, what happened to the man who had been crawling on his knees for 7 years?
He stood up and walked normally into the clinic.
Just like that.
The debilitating back pain completely vanished.
It evaporated. He felt so good that he actually took a job working as a furniture mover for the clinic. And a year later, he mailed the doctor a photograph of himself and his wife standing triumphantly at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro.
It sounds like a miraculous exaggeration until you examine the anatomical pathways. The MRI wasn't lying. He did have a herniated disc.
Right, the disc was an issue.
But the herniation was not the root cause of his agony. The herniated disc was simply the weakest structural link in his body.
Oh, I see.
And it became inflamed and symptomatic because of the systemic toxic overload constantly dripping into his bloodstream from the rotting tooth.
I know this is where skeptics will dig their heels in. It sounds almost medieval or like voodoo to suggest that a painless dead tooth in the jaw is the direct cause of a ruptured disc symptom that stumped multiple orthopedic specialists. How does localized gangrene translate to structural spine failure?
The source material connects this phenomenon to one of the oldest diagnostic systems on Earth, traditional Chinese medicine.
Okay.
Thousands of years ago, long before X-rays, Chinese medical practitioners mapped out energetic pathways called meridians that flow through the body.
Right, meridian lines.
They documented that every single tooth in the mouth sits on a specific meridian that corresponds directly to specific organs and structural systems.
For instance, the wisdom teeth sit on the meridian connected to the heart and the small intestine.
Precisely. But this isn't just ancient mysticism. Modern bacteriology and DNA sequencing fully validate this connection. When cardiologists analyzed the plaque removed from the clogged arteries of cardiovascular disease patients, they consistently find the exact same specific strains of anaerobic bacteria that reside in infected root canals and deep periodontal pockets.
Wow.
The infection didn't originate in the heart. It originated in the dead, oxygen-starved space in the jaw. The bacteria breed there, and their biotoxins constantly drip into the circulatory system.
It just travels through the body.
Exactly, triggering massive systemic inflammation that seeks out and destroys the body's weakest tissue, whether that's an artery, a joint, or a lower back disc.
The source material refers to an unholy trinity of stealth invaders that can utterly dismantle even a robust immune system. Dead teeth and root canals are one pillar. Environmental mold toxicity is the second. But the third is arguably the most complex, rapidly expanding, and misunderstood epidemic of our modern era: Lyme disease.
Lyme disease is heavily clouded by outdated medical narratives.
Yeah, the standard conventional story is highly specific. You go hiking in the dense woods of the Northeast, you get bitten by a specific type of deer tick, you develop a classic bullseye rash, you take a 3-week course of doxycycline, and you are perfectly cured.
But the clinical reality discussed in the material shatters that narrative entirely. First of all, it's not just isolated to ticks in the woods.
Not at all. The bacteria responsible for Lyme, known as Borrelia, can be carried and transmitted by almost any biting insect that feeds on an infected host and then bites a human.
Like what else?
Mosquitoes, biting flies, and fleas are all documented vectors. You don't have to be bushwhacking through Maine to contract it. You could be bitten by a mosquito in your backyard in Florida or California.
And the organism itself, Borrelia, is not some fragile, simple bacteria. It is ancient, and it is horrifyingly intelligent.
Ancient is the correct term. Researchers have utilized DNA testing to find evidence of Lyme bacteria inside the tissues of Egyptian mummies dating back 3,000 years.
That's insane.
It has had millennia to evolve and perfect its survival strategies against the human immune system. To comprehend its sophistication, we have to look at how bacteria share defensive information.
Right, through plasmids.
Yes, bacteria contain small, circular DNA molecules called plasmids. You can think of plasmids as biological USB flash drives that contain genetic blueprints for survival.
Like how to mutate to resist antibiotics.
Exactly. For example, instructions on how to mutate to neutralize penicillin. An average standard bacteria might possess 2 or 3 of these plasmids to share tactical data with its colony.
Okay, a standard bacteria has 2 or 3 defense blueprints. How many does the Borrelia bacteria have?
Up to 23.
23.
It is armed to the teeth with evolutionary defense mechanisms.
It possesses an incredible array of cloaking devices. It can actively alter its surface proteins to evade detection.
It's basically wearing camouflage.
Yes. It can deploy biochemical decoys to distract white blood cells. It can drill deep into avascular tissues like joint cartilage where immune cells and antibiotics struggle to reach. And it can even curl up into a dormant protective cyst when threatened by antibiotics, only to re-emerge months later when the coast is clear.
This shape-shifting ability is precisely why traditional diagnostic testing for Lyme disease fails so spectacularly. Standard infectious disease tests like the Western blot or ELISA do not look for the actual bacteria. They look for the specific antibodies your immune system is supposed to produce in response.
Right, they look for the footprint.
But because Borrelia constantly changes its surface disguises, the immune system remains perpetually confused. It fails to produce the standard antibody footprint, and the conventional test comes back entirely negative.
Imagine the psychological toll on the patient. They're suffering from debilitating chronic fatigue, agonizing joint pain, brain fog, and neurological tremors. They visit a dozen different specialists.
And the doctors run the standard Lyme panel, it comes back negative, and they're essentially told, your blood work is perfect, it's all in your head.
Yeah.
Here's a prescription for antidepressants.
It's tragic. So how do functional doctors actually find this stealth pathogen?
They have to use diagnostic methods that bypass the immune system's confusion and hunt for the bacteria's actual DNA. Functional clinics utilize highly sensitive PCR testing, which looks for the genetic signature of the organism.
But even with PCR, because the bacteria is hiding deep inside the cartilage and nervous tissue, you can't just draw surface blood. You have to actively provoke the bacteria out of its bunkers.
The provocation protocol they described is intense. It's incredibly physical.
It requires mechanical force. They hydrate the patient aggressively and then subject them to intense physical vibration.
Like putting them on a machine.
Yeah, placing them on a vibrating power plate for 15 minutes or having a therapist perform incredibly deep, painful Rolfing massage on the connective tissues.
That sounds brutal.
It is. This extreme physical pressure literally squeezes the hidden bacteria and the neurotoxins they produce out of the deep fascial tissue and flushes them into the lymphatic system and the bloodstream.
And then what?
After this provocation, they collect a urine sample. Only then, once the bacteria have been physically evicted from their hiding spots, can the PCR test definitively isolate the Lyme DNA.
Let's pull back and look at the cumulative effect of everything we've discussed. Whether it's a jawbone-dripping gangrenous toxins, a stealth tick-borne bacteria actively evading the immune system, or environmental mold spores breathing toxins into your lungs. All of these factors place an unbearable, suffocating load on your cellular machinery.
They absolutely do.
And when our cells are pushed beyond the brink of survival by this toxic burden, It initiates the ultimate, most terrifying cellular malfunction known to medicine.
Which brings us to the final and most profound paradigm shift of this discussion, the metabolic roots of cancer.
Cancer's word surrounded by sheer terror. In the cultural zeitgeist, we view cancer through a genetic lens. We treat it like a tragic lottery, a random genetic mutation where an alien cell just decides to multiply and attack the host.
That is the standard narrative.
But the framework presented in this source material, which is grounded in science that won a Nobel Prize nearly a century ago, views cancer entirely differently. It frames cancer not as a genetic mutation, but fundamentally as a mitochondrial disease.
To trace this back, we have to look at the work of Dr. Otto Warburg, a German physician and researcher who won the Nobel Prize in Physiology in 1931 for his discovery regarding how cells respire and produce energy.
Okay, what did he find?
He essentially proved that the root driver of cancer lies in a profound shift in cellular metabolism.
Let's visualize the energy mechanics of a normal, perfectly healthy cell. Inside almost every cell in your body, you have microscopic energy factories called mitochondria. How many of these factories exist in a single cell?
In an average cell, there are between 1,000 and 2,000 mitochondria.
That's a lot of factories.
And in tissues that require massive amounts of continuous energy, like the human heart or a woman's ovaries, you can find upwards of 10,000 mitochondria packed into a single cell.
These factories operate on a highly efficient system called aerobic metabolism. They take in oxygen from the air you breathe, and they take in fuel like glucose derived from the food you eat.
Right.
They combust the fuel using the oxygen, and the output is a cellular energy currency called ATP. When this aerobic engine is running smoothly, how much energy does it yield?
It is remarkably efficient. For every cycle, the aerobic metabolism of glucose yields 38 units of ATP. 38 ATP is the hallmark signature of a healthy, oxygen-breathing, thriving human cell.
38 units.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as we have spent the last hour detailing, our modern internal environments are often heavily polluted. When biotoxins from mold, heavy metals, industrial chemicals, or hidden viral pathogens flood into the cellular environment, they begin to poison and degrade those mitochondrial factories.
The physical architecture of the mitochondria gets damaged.
Yeah.
The cell literally loses its ability to utilize oxygen. It begins to suffocate.
Exactly. Now, nature built a fail-safe mechanism for this exact scenario.
Oh, thank goodness.
Under normal, healthy conditions, if a cell becomes this damaged, toxic, and unable to respire, it is genetically programmed to sacrifice itself for the survival of the organism.
Like a suicide switch.
Exactly. This kill switch is regulated by the p53 gene. When the p53 gene senses catastrophic mitochondrial failure, it triggers a process called apoptosis. The cell neatly dismantles its own DNA, packages itself up, and quietly dies so the immune system can clear it away.
But in the genesis of cancer, that fail-safe switch breaks. The constant barrage of biotoxins damages the p53 gene itself.
So the cell is suffocating, it can no longer process oxygen, but the suicide switch is broken, it cannot die.
It is trapped in a state of toxic limbo.
So, faced with imminent death from suffocation, the cell is forced to execute a desperate, radical metabolic shift.
What does it do?
It abandons the highly efficient aerobic metabolism, and it reverts to an ancient, primitive form of energy production, anaerobic metabolism or fermentation. It begins fermenting glucose for energy without using any oxygen.
And the mathematical drop-off in energy production during fermentation is staggering.
It is a massive downgrade. Instead of producing a robust 38 units of ATP, anaerobic fermentation only yields 2 units of ATP per cycle.
Just two.
Just 2. The cell is barely producing enough energy to keep the lights on.
To survive on a paltry 2 ATP, the suffocating cell has to do something drastic.
Yeah.
It reaches deep down into its genetic archives and switches on ancient programs that haven't been active since you were in the womb. It turns on its embryonic genes.
This is where the functional understanding of cancer fundamentally redefines the disease. Think about the biological imperative of an embryo. A fertilized egg becomes a fully formed human infant in just 40 weeks.
That's a huge amount of growth.
That requires explosive, unchecked cellular growth. Furthermore, embryonic cells have to be mobile. A cell that originates near the primitive spinal cord might have to physically detach, migrate through the embryonic fluid, and reattach to become a nerve ending in the foot.
But in a healthy adult, these genes for rapid growth and physical migration are strictly, permanently turned off. An adult liver cell stays in the liver. It adheres tightly to its neighbors and only divides when necessary for repair.
But the suffocating, cancer-forming cell, desperate to survive its toxic environment, flips those embryonic switches back on. It loses its adhesion proteins, meaning it can detach from its neighbors and float through the bloodstream.
Which is the exact mechanism of metastasis.
Yes, and it begins dividing and growing wildly out of control.
It completely changes the narrative. A cancer cell isn't an alien invader that just randomly decided to kill you. It is your own cell, reverting to its most primal, aggressive survival programming just to stay alive in an environment that has become too toxic to breathe in.
And because it is now relying on the incredibly inefficient fermentation process yielding only 2 ATP instead of 38, it is absolutely ravenous for fuel.
It needs sugar.
Exactly. To generate enough energy to fuel that explosive embryonic growth, the cancer cell must consume astronomical amounts of glucose.
The clinical validation of this extreme sugar addiction is found in how modern oncology actually locates cancer in the body. Look at how a PET scan works.
Right, a PET scan does not look for cancer cells directly.
It exploits the cancer's metabolic addiction to sugar.
Exactly. The technician injects the patient with a specialized radioactive glucose solution. Because the cancer cells are fermenting sugar at such a rapid rate to survive, they act like a vacuum for that glucose.
Wow.
The source material references clinical observations where cancerous liver cells were documented consuming up to 68 times more glucose than the healthy liver cells immediately surrounding them.
68 times the sugar uptake. So when the doctor looks at the PP scan monitor, the tumors simply light up bright white because they have gorged themselves on the radioactive sugar.
Precisely.
Huh.
Now, understanding this metabolic shift drastically alters the philosophy of how to treat the disease.
How does the standard approach compare?
The conventional oncological approach primarily relies on maximum tolerated doses of chemotherapy, essentially carpet bombing the entire body with toxins in the hope that the rapidly dividing cancer cells die just slightly before the healthy cells do.
The functional metabolic approach asks a different set of questions. How can we change the cellular environment back to one of high oxygen? And how can we weaponize the cancer's own biological mechanisms against it?
The functional protocols described are fascinating because they use the cancer's own greed as a Trojan horse.
Yes, insulin potentiation therapy is a prime example.
Let's explain that one.
Because the cancer cell has altered its surface receptors to absorb as much glucose and insulin as possible, functional practitioners will administer a small dose of insulin to the patient.
The cancer cells open wide to receive what they think is a massive sugar payload.
Exactly. At that exact moment, the practitioner sneaks a microdose of chemotherapy, perhaps only 10% of a traditional dose, directly into the bloodstream.
The cancer cells absorb the poison directly into their core.
You are delivering a highly targeted strike against the ravenous cell, while sparing the healthy, non-fermenting cells from the toxic fallout.
They combine this targeted strike with therapies designed to forcibly restore the oxygen environment. They put patients in hyperbaric oxygen chambers under pressure to force oxygen deep into the hypoxic tissues.
They utilize high-dose intravenous vitamin C, which acts as a pro-oxidant inside the cancer cell, and curcumin to reduce systemic inflammation.
The entire goal is to selectively stress the cancer while aggressively preserving and rebuilding the host's own immune system, so the body itself can take over the cleanup process.
And for anyone listening who is currently healthy, this brings up the most vital takeaway of the entire discussion. What can you do right now to ensure your cells never have to make this desperate metabolic shift?
That's the million-dollar question.
If cancer is born in a toxic, oxygen-starved environment, then true prevention is entirely about maintaining a clean internal environment.
Prevention is the new cure. It means being militant about keeping your natural detox pathways wide open. You need to be sweating heavily on a regular basis to excrete toxins through the skin.
You need daily, healthy bowel movements.
You must minimize the chemical emulsifiers and pesticides that punch holes in your gut membrane.
And crucially, you have to address stealth infections, whether it's testing for environmental mold, pulling a dead tooth, or treating a tick bite early before those biotoxins have a chance to systemically poison your mitochondria.
It is about radically reducing the total toxic burden on your cellular machinery, allowing your mitochondria the freedom to simply breathe.
We have traversed a monumental amount of biological terrain today. Let's trace the arc of this incredible journey.
It's been a lot.
We started at the absolute microscopic level, dismantling the myth of protein, and realizing that if we don't supply the precise ratio of single amino acid bricks, or if our stomach acid is artificially suppressed by daily antacids, we cannot harvest those materials.
Leading to invisible systemic structural collapse.
We followed those unbroken protein chains as they slipped through the compromised border wall of a leaky gut, witnessing firsthand how the immune system's logical defense mechanisms become confused, resulting in the body attacking its own joints and thyroid via molecular mimicry.
We uncovered the terrifying reality of hidden focal infections, how a painless, dead root canal in the jaw or an ancient, highly evolved Lyme bacteria wielding 23 defensive plasmids can act as a permanent toxic factory, short-circuiting our meridians and causing systemic mechanical failures.
And finally, we tracked those biotoxins all the way down into the mitochondrial power plants of the cell, seeing clearly how a suffocating cell will desperately revert to explosive embryonic wraith just to survive.
Revealing the true metabolic origin of cancer.
It is a profoundly empowering way to view human biology, and I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative concept to mull over. Throughout this entire deep dive, we've observed the human body executing extreme, seemingly destructive actions. It produces antibodies that attack its own thyroid gland. It creates paralyzing, fiery inflammation in the joints. Its cells even sever their connections and revert to wild, embryonic states to survive.
Yeah.
For our entire lives, the medical establishment has taught us to view these symptoms as a disease, a random, tragic failure of the body that we must aggressively numb, suppress, and drug away with powerful immunosuppressants and acid blockers.
But what if we completely flipped the scripts?
Exactly. What if the symptoms we constantly fight are not failures at all? What if they are actually the body's most desperate, highly intelligent attempts to heal itself in the face of an impossible toxic burden?
Our body never expends energy for nothing.
So what if we stopped fighting the symptom, stopped smashing the smoke alarm, and finally started asking the body what it's trying so desperately to protect us from?
When the check engine light illuminates on your biological dashboard, the choice is entirely yours. Will you just put a piece of black tape over the light, or will you open the hood and investigate the engine?
Keep questioning your assumptions. Keep exploring the incredible potential of your own health. And remember that you are the architect of your own biology. Make sure you are providing the right building materials. We'll see you on the next deep dive.